Turned off the heat on both sides. Junior, you turn the heat both outlets. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We're good? We're good? Okay, thank you for coming. If I could just ask of you to put your cell phones on vibrate or off, we would appreciate it very much. If you could do it in the beginning of the class, thank you. It's going to get very cool. Watch what you ask for. There's a famous pasuk in Parshas Chukas, Zois HaTorah Adam, Adam ki yamos ba'ayil, which is interpreted often homiletically that Torah is compared to a person. Zois HaTorah Adam. In fact, the pasuk in Bereshis says, Zes Sefer told us Adam. The story of Adam, the story of the human being, is also called a Sefer, a book. And it includes not only a book, but the book of books, as we call it, the Sefer HaSfarim, the book of books, is also told us Adam is compared to a person. Or to put it in different words, the human organism, the Adam, is a microcosm of Torah. And the Torah is a reflection of Adam. They both mirror each other. And the comparison exists on many, many levels. One of them is, and it can truly be appreciated uniquely in our generation, since the 1950s, when DNA has been discovered. Until that point, even the greatest biologists and scientists did not appreciate the extraordinary complexity of the structure behind a living organism. Any living organism, including the human organism. With DNA, a world was opened up. Not a world, not one world, but many worlds. And one of its unique properties and qualities and characteristics, which you can research on your own further, but I want to bring out this one point is, a human body is comprised of approximately 37 trillion cells. And please remember the number trillion. That's not 37 cells, which would also be nice. It's not 3,700 cells, not 37,000 cells, not 370,000 cells, or 37 million or billion cells. That's not the numbers we're talking about. We're talking about 37 trillion cells, maybe even more. And that's even the tiny body, the tiny organism of a person, of a baby, a child. And each one of those cells has what we call the DNA structure, or the genome, which basically each cell has a double copy of a program you could call DNA, which contains, in simple English, the instructions for the entire organism. Each one of the 37 trillion cells has a double copy of what you may call a program code, a scroll. If you would actually take the DNA in a cell and compare it to a scroll and spread it out like a Megillah to read, if you would be able to unravel it and read it as a scroll, it would fill the height of the Empire State Building 3 times. Understand what I'm saying? This is one cell from the 37 trillion cells. And it's a program, it's written like a computer program. I mean, a computer program pales in comparison to this program, but in the sense it's all information and it's organized, because it's basically made up of what seems like 4 letters. It's not really letters, but we call it 4 letters simply to give it language. And it's organized in a particular fashion. And if one would come before the other, it would make chaos in the system. And every aspect of the organism, there's not a small detail that is not included over there in the DNA. And each cell captures the entire organism, which is why from the saliva of a person, you could know the totality of the person. DNA testing, you have it in the nail. From the nail, you can identify somebody who lived 1,000 years ago or somebody who did something decades ago, because each aspect, each cell contains the information of the entire organism. Zois ha-Torah Adam. The Torah is exactly the same thing. Every prat, every detail. It says, the Gemara says in Maseches Psachim, Rashi brings it, it's a famous principle, Ein mukdam u'meucha b'Torah. Ein mukdam u'meucha b'Torah means there's no earlier and later in Torah. Literally, it means it wasn't written in chronological order. There are events that happened first, and they're written later. There are other events that happened later, but they're written earlier. The classic example is Sefer Bamidbar opens up, Parshas Bamidbar opens up with Hashem telling Moshe to count the Jewish people. When? On the first day of the month of Iyar. On the first day of the second month of the year, after the first anniversary of the Exodus of Egypt. They left Egypt on Pesach. 1 year later, 1 year and 2 weeks later, okay. 1 year and 2 weeks later, he told Moshe Rabbeinu to count the Jews. That's Parshas Bamidbar. If you go 2 Parshas later, Parshas Ba'aloischa, he talks to Moshe Rabbeinu and tells him to tell the Jews to offer the Pesach offering. That happened on the 1st of Nisan. So Parshas Bamidbar describes an event that happened in the month of Iyar. Parshas Ba'aloischa describes an event that happened in the month of Nisan. Ein mukdam u'meucha b'Torah. Sometimes it happened later, but it's written earlier. Sometimes it happened earlier, and it's written later. It's not written in chronological order. This is what the Gemara says in Tractate Psachim, page 6. Tosfos says, Tosfos Rabbeinu Peretz gives an extraordinary insight, and he says, why couldn't the Torah be written in order? He says, if the Torah would have been written in order, these are his words, then everybody would be able to create worlds as he desires. And everybody would be able to do whatever they want with the universe. What does Tosfos Rabbeinu Peretz mean? Just like the human organism has DNA, the cosmos has DNA. The DNA of the universe is the Torah. DNA is always based on order. If the Torah would have been written in the order of the DNA, then anybody with Torah would be able to create worlds as they wish, because it's the DNA of the cosmos, and manipulate the world as they wish. Therefore, it was out of order. And because it's out of order, so now go figure out the order in order to be able to get to the DNA that represents the structure of the universe. But what this also means is that every detail of Torah, every cell of the 37 trillion cells has it all. You have to know how to read the cell. You have to be able to unravel the cell. You have to be able to explore what it is. But within it, you have everything. Or in the words of Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, ha'etzem k'sha'ata toifes b'miktsasai ata toifes b'kulai. Whenever you deal with core truth, even if you get only a little bit of it, you got all of it. Because if it's on the level of core, every fragment has everything. And the entire picture is contained within the smallest fraction. Because it's not really a fraction. It's part of an indivisible essence that encompasses all. So that's why whenever you deal with things on the level of DNA, you don't need a lot. The tiniest part of it encompasses all of it. But you have to deal with the level of DNA. On that level, on the cellular level, and with what is contained within the cells, you're dealing with etzem, you're dealing with the core. Etzem means the bone, the core, the essence, the quintessence of the body, the quintessence of the organism. And then one little prat, one little detail reflects and encompasses and contains it all. With Torah also, on the DNA level of Torah, meaning in the core of Torah, in Etzem HaTorah, any detail, any nuance captures its entire truth. I say this today as an intro to the class because I want to illustrate this in one particular area. It would seem not very significant or relevant. Two interpretations that seem like, okay, two interpretations. But when one appreciates the core level, the DNA level, what we're calling the cellular structure of Torah from a spiritual perspective, one could see how this contains a full world hashkafa that translates in so many other different areas that are not directly connected to this. Parshas Va'era records the first 7 plagues that descended upon Egypt prior to the liberation of the Jewish people from Egypt. Dam, Tzvardeya, Kinim, Arev, Dever, Shchin, and Barad. The last 3 will be recorded in Parshas Boy, Arba, Choshech, Makas, B'chayres. But Dam, blood, Tzvardeya, frogs, Kinim, lice, Arev, wild animals, Dever, a plague, Shchin, boils, and finally Barad, hail. The hail that descended from the sky over Egypt and damaged the country significantly. Okay, thank God it's not Barat. That was the 7th plague that descended on Egypt. Then you have the last 3, locust, darkness, and the death of the firstborn males of the Egyptian regime and empire, which oppressed the Hebrew slaves and kept them in bondage for so many bitter and difficult years. The last plague of Parshas Va'era is Barad, hail. And that's the conclusion of the portion. And the way the Torah describes it is, Hashem tells Moshe, after warning Parai again and again and again, and his abstinence, his refusal, and rebelliousness, not allowing the slaves to go free and continuously oppressing and persecuting them. So Hashem tells Moshe, lift up your hand towards the heaven, on the heaven. V'hi barad b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. Barad is hail. Hail will descend on the entire Egypt, on humans, on animals, on all the produce, on all of the grass of the field. The Torah says, indeed, what we heard were koilos, thunders, strong sounds, and barad. And it was a unique type of hail. It was a hail v'hi barad v'eish mislakachas. Hail is, of course, droplets of ice, but they contained within it. It was cold ice containing inside a blaze, a glowing fire, a burning fire. Eish mislakachas b'toicha barad kaved miyoid. It was very heavy. Egypt never experienced such a downpouring of hail. Me'oz hoysel agoy, from when it became a civilization, from when it became a nation. It struck everything that was outdoors. Whatever remained outdoors, vulnerable to the weather was struck down. If it was people, humans, Egyptians, if it was animals, if it was the grass of the field, produce, trees, bushes, shrubs, plants, all the trees were broken, were devastated as a result of the hail because it was so intense, it was so heavy. Where the Jews lived in Goshen, there was no hail, lo haya barat. Parai summons Moshe and Aaron. And when they come into him, he finally says these words which he never said before. Chatasi hapam. Now I sinned. Now I discovered that I sinned. Hashem hatzadik v'ani v'ami harishayim. God is righteous. My people and I have behaved wickedly, as Rishayim, wickedly. Please beg Hashem and ask him to stop these thunders and to stop the hail, and I'm going to send you out. So Moshe says, I will leave the city. I will spread out my hands to God. The thunders will cease. And the barad lo yi'oid, habarad lo yi'oid. The hail will not continue and will not be anymore, so that you will know that God rules the world. L'man teida ki l'Hashem aretz. And the Torah finishes the story, and this is how Parshas Vayera concludes. Moshe went out of the city. He spread out his hands. Vayifres kapav el Hashem. He spread out his hands to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And indeed, vayachtelu hakolos. The thunder, the voices, the storm ceased. V'habarad, and the hail, it stopped. And then the Torah adds 4 strange words. Umatar loynitach arza. And the rain did not arrive to the earth. Umatar loynitach arza. What does this mean? And then, of course, the story ends that Parai saw that there's no hail, and there's calm and serenity, and his heart became stubborn again, and he refused to let the Jewish people go. And that's the end of Parshas Vayera, which will then lead to the continuation of the story in the next portion. So Rashi, the great commentator of Chumash who explains every word that is difficult, asks, what does it mean, Umatar, the rain, loynitach arza? We understand that the hail stopped. It stopped raining. There was no hail, there was no fire, there were no thunderstorms. The weather now, the sun started to shine. Got it. It says the koilas stopped, the barat stopped. Like you say, it stopped raining. But then the Torah adds, Umatar loynitach arza. The rain didn't come down to the earth. What does it mean? It stopped raining? You said it stopped. The hail stopped. So Rashi says, loynitach means lohigia. It did not reach the earth. Af oisun shahayu ba'avir lohigiu la'aretz. The drops, the particles, I should say, of rain or of hail that were in the air did not reach the earth, meaning they remained suspended. It's not just the rain stopped. So it stops raining. The rain that's falling, obviously there's gravity, it comes down, and then it stops raining. There's no new rain that comes. That's not what he says. He says the hail stopped. That's true. It didn't continue. This is called a class with musical accompaniment. God is helping us illustrate everything we're talking about, but we're glad that it's benign. Very benign, thank God. It's also one of the few classes in New York, in the middle of the winter, outdoors. I don't know how many other classes that way. Another miracle. Okay. So that's a very interesting interpretation. Umatar, the rain, even the rain that was already out, not only the clouds did not emit new rain. A rain stops, it stops. Even the rain that already came out, it started to come down. It's supposed to come down to the earth. No. Umatar loynitach arza. What was the point of this new miracle? The plagues were supernatural. Many aspects of them, or all aspects of them, were supernatural. But here, the miracle is already after it ends. After it ends, another miracle. That the rain remained suspended. The drops of rain remained suspended. Now what happened with them? Rashi doesn't get into it. There's a Gemara in Brachas, the end of Brachas, that it came down at a later period, or on a literal level, you may want to say the next time it rained, it just came down. However you interpret it, he doesn't get into that. What happened with these drops? But somehow they were suspended mid-air. That's one interpretation. Nitach means lo higia. It did not reach the earth. The plague stopped, it stopped. What's that game? Musical chairs, right? The music stops. There's no, I didn't get to my chair yet. Wherever you are, and there's no chair under you, tough luck. Go play another game. Stop. It stopped. Everybody stops. It's frozen. Where you frozen? You're frozen in midair. Why don't you come down? We're not functioning anymore. Everything was put to a stop. If you didn't leave the clouds, great. If you left, tough luck, you can't move. It's a very interesting interpretation. Then Rashi gives a second interpretation. And Rashi says that nitach may mean not arrived. Loi nitach doesn't mean it didn't arrive. Rather, it didn't pour down. Loi nitach la'aretz, loi hutsak la'aretz. As he brings different proofs from Tanakh, loi nitach means it wasn't poured down to the earth. In other words, it didn't continue. Completely different interpretation. Matar loi nitach arza doesn't mean the rain didn't reach the earth. The rain wasn't poured down to the earth. Which is not just a different translation, it's a different meaning. Meaning that the rain, like we would say, the rain stopped. It didn't continue to be poured down. Loi nitach in the first interpretation is it didn't arrive to the earth. In other words, it was on the way, but it didn't get there. Like you'll say, he left, but he didn't arrive. He left, but he didn't arrive. The second interpretation is he never left. It was never poured down. It never turned into a liquid. It never turned into a liquid of rain that flows down. It remained congealed. It didn't flow out. It didn't trickle down as a liquid that flows, as drops of water, or a rain pour that flows, that comes down. Lo yihutzak, in other words, it didn't continue. Which is, of course, not a new miracle. It's just like saying it stopped raining. There was no new rain. No new water was poured out of the clouds, and no new hail emerged. A whole different interpretation. On one level, what does this mean? He's struggling with the word nitach. It's not a regular word. What does nitach mean? Does it come from the word, Rashi says, according to the first interpretation, it comes from the word vatitach aleinu ha'olav ha'shvua. An oath came to us, it arrived. That's from the book of Daniel. According to the second interpretation, it's kihituch kesef, when you melt silver, and from a solid it becomes a liquid. If you ever saw how they melt metals, or they melt silver, loshin yitzikas matchas, when metal becomes something that's poor, you could pour it, it becomes a liquid. You know, when you melt it because it's not a solid anymore. That's what lo nitach means from the word melt. In other words, the matter never emerged into a liquid. Not only didn't arrive to the earth, it wasn't in a position of flowing anymore because it wasn't poured out. It remained congealed wherever it is, in the clouds, etc. So on one level, it seems like a very technical difference. It results in a very serious difference if there was a new miracle at the end of the plague. According to the first interpretation, it's a pretty dramatic miracle. Everyone walks outside, and there's droplets of rain all over the place, but they're suspended in midair. And somehow gravity is not doing its magic. According to the second interpretation, it was a miracle, but now it's gone. The rain stopped, Baruch Hashem, back to normal. Parai is stubborn once again. It's another miserable morning in Egyptian exile. And here we will see how two different interpretations, which seemingly are an interpretation on one word, nitach, umatar loy nitach arza, just one word. But again, on the level of DNA, on the level of core, it captures not just a deeper meaning, but a meaning that informs much of life. And this is what we're going to dwell on. Be'ezer Hashem, which will also explain what would be the value and the meaning in the first interpretation, what would be the significance of it. When we speak of good deeds and rewards, or bad deeds and punishments, sin and punishment, there are two different ways of understanding it. One way of understanding it is you do a good deed and you get rewarded. One does a bad deed and they're penalized for it. That's one way of understanding it. There's another more subtle way of understanding it, and this view is expressed at length in the works of the Shalah Rabbeinu Yeshaya Horowitz, who wrote a sefer called Shalah, which stands for Shnei Luchos Habris. He lived in the 16th century, the 16th and 17th century. Rav of Frankfurt in Germany, Rav of Prague, Czechoslovakia today, and finally in Yerushalayim, buried in Tiberias and Tveria near the Rambam. The Shalah and Shnei Luchos Habris dedicates a lot of space to convey this other perspective, which sees reward and punishment not at, you can hear me in the back with all the noise, who sees reward and punishment not as you did it, you're going to get punished, you did it, you're going to get rewarded, but actually as a direct consequence that emerges from the deed itself, which is one of the interpretations, not all, but one of the interpretations in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, schar mitzvah mitzvah, uschar aveira aveira. The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah, the reward or the consequence of the aveira is the aveira. And what one of the interpretations is, there are different ones, but one of them is that rewards and penalties are not disconnected from the act. They're rather a organic consequence, which would really mean that the word punishment could often be very misunderstood, misconstrued in our perception. To give an example, say somebody walks outside in a very cold winter day. It's freezing outside. Together with the winds, it's maybe 8 below zero. But you don't like wearing a coat. You probably have one son or daughter like that. They don't have to wear coats. Already when they were 3, they were putter from coats. Now some people are actually like that. I've met them. Interesting creatures. But let's talk about the people who don't fall into those supernatural categories. And they need coats. So I say, I don't want a coat. And I go out, I'm just going to shul, it's close, I go out, and of course I get a cold. Now you could call it a punishment, but that's really doesn't capture what happened. It's more of a consequence. If I decide to jump off a building 3 or 4 stories high, certainly 10 stories high, I'll probably hurt a few bones in my body, to put it mildly. Is it a punishment? I wouldn't call it a punishment. It's a consequence. You have to respect the laws of nature. The laws of nature dictate, right? I once saw a fellow, when I was in yeshiva, he was a muscular, strong fellow, and he was crossing Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, which is a very, very busy intersection, and the cars are flying. And I told him, listen, even a strong guy like you, if I'm not mistaken, according to the laws of physics, when that truck hits it, there may be consequences. So just remember, you're a strong fellow, but you have to respect the boundaries of nature. And if I take my finger, as I did last night, and I put it into the oven to take out something, and I didn't wear a glove because I was a chacham, right? So the Torah calls it kviya tachas kviya. A burn for a burn, a burn for a burn. Is it a punishment? It's a consequence. The fact is that there are laws of nature. I can ignore them. Let's take an example that some of you love to hear and some of you don't like to hear. It's called nutrition. If my nutritionist tells me, this is your blood type, this is your body, you want to eat carbs, which you love, knock yourself out. But you're going to be lethargic. You're going to feel heavy. You're going to get into a bad mood. Of course, you're tempted when you wake up in the morning to eat that extra pancake with maple syrup that your child did not manage to eat because the bus came. It's a wonderful thing to eat a pancake, and certainly if he left 6 pancakes, it would be wonderful to consume all 6 pancakes and start your day off on a high note. That would be wonderful. The problem is, from the high note, you're going to end in a very low note. And if you know yourself, Some people, for some reason, can eat 6 pancakes, 12 pancakes, and nothing happened. You don't notice it. They have a metabolism or some type of psyche that is immune to these things. But some of us, the moment you ate that extra pancake, whoops! Depression, sadness, melancholy, uncertainty, self-doubt. Why am I alive? Who am I? Who am I not? I'm quitting my job. Why am I working? Why am I this? Why am I that? Whoa, whoa, whoa. You become an existential philosopher. You're not an existentialist. You're not a philosopher. You just had an extra pancake. Tomorrow, get rid of the pancake and your adrenaline will flow. So you could say, is this a punishment? I ate too much, I ate the wrong foods, and now I'm being punished. I feel sick, I feel lethargic, I feel heavy, I feel in a bad mood. It's not a punishment. You could call it that way, but you're not capturing the truth of it. It's a consequence of not respecting who you are. A person, maturity means knowing your boundaries, knowing your identity, creating space for it and respecting it. You have a body. A person ought to respect the body. A person ought to respect the type of body you have. Different people have different needs. Different people are allergic to different things. Different people can tolerate different things that other people can't tolerate. Respecting those boundaries means simply recognizing that we live in a world of causes and effects. And if I fail to assume responsibility and make believe that this cause has no consequences, I'm not hurting anybody but me who will bear those consequences, either in short term or maybe not short term, but long term. And this is true with everything. But Yiddishkeit comes and takes it a step further. Just as there are physical laws of nature, there are also spiritual laws of nature. There are also what you may call psychological laws. There are emotional laws. I can't put my finger in a burning oven or on a hot stove and expect that there will be no consequence. Why do I think that I could lie and there won't be a consequence? I ate the wrong pancake and my blood did not react nicely, my digestive system did not react nicely, my circulatory system did not react nicely, my various systems did not react nicely. Why? Because I violated and I did not respect their laws. Why do I think that my soul will react nicely when I put it in the stove? If I lie, I violated the laws of spiritual nature. Now my soul feels grouchy. This is what we call the conscience. The soul also has laws. And if I violate them, if I don't respect its identity, I have to bear the consequences. There are consequences that are noticeable immediately. There are consequences that are unconscious. If a person insults somebody, if a person uses foul language constantly, if a person causes somebody pain, they may feel it, but I also feel it. If I'm sensitive, I'm going to feel it right away. If I'm not, I'm going to feel it later. But it's basically, I jumped off 3 stories, I hurt my body. If I do other things, I hurt my conscience, I hurt my soul. And that's where healing is needed. Repentance is needed. Recovery is needed. Transformation is needed. And this is true in all laws of life. So there are the physical laws of nature. There are also spiritual laws of nature. There's cause and effect on a tangible scientific level. You walk outside when it's hot is different when you walk outside when it's cold. You walk barefoot. You went out without a coat. You put your hand where it doesn't belong. You put into your body what doesn't belong in the body. But there's also spiritual laws of causes and effect. And just because they're not as tangible doesn't mean they're not as effective. Sometimes they're more effective because they touch me in a very deep place. And that's what maturity means. Maturity means taking responsibility for my words, for my actions, for my thoughts, and for my interactions with people, realizing I can deny it. I could make believe that my body is not allergic to anything, that I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, but I'm not living in reality. And whenever you don't live in reality, ultimately reality punches you in the face. Now you could deny that you have a face, and you could deny that you're getting punched in the face, and that's why people become addicted to numbers. Why do we become addicted to things that numb our pain? And I'm not only talking about dramatic numbers as numbers. Did I just make up a word? Huh? Numbers, things that numb you. They numb you. Why do people have to numb themselves? I have to numb myself because imagine if my finger didn't have any nerves, I would put it in fire and I wouldn't feel any pain. That wouldn't help me. The fact that I feel pain and I scream is because my finger is healthy and it's responding to danger. What do? Numbers just cut the nerves. They don't alter the consequences. They just allow you to experience the ruin without being conscious of it, which means I go down. I don't go downward spiral without being aware of what I'm doing because I cut the nerves. Why? Because it's too painful. So if I'm living a life of self-destruction, it's very hard to keep those nerves alive because what am I doing? And that's why I have to fry my brain or dull my senses. And this is the story of many a life. And it's more painful than the destruction. Because the destruction itself, if I could be conscious of it, I could scream, I could cry. There's a beautiful interpretation of the Geri Rebbe, the Imrei Emes, or the Sfas Emes. Some attributed to the Sfas Emes. One of the Geri Rebbes, the Chidush Yarim, or Sfas Emes, or Imrei Emes, I saw it quoted from different ones. Hashem tells Moshe in the beginning of Parshas Va'era, the beginning of the portion, V'oitzeisi eschem mitachas sivlois Mitzrayim. I will take you out from the sivlois. What do sivlois mean? Literally, it's translated as the burdens of Egypt. Egypt burdens you. I will take you out of the burden. You won't have to be under that burden. But he said, really, the word sivlois in Lashon Kodesh comes from the word lisbol. What does lisbol mean? Tolerate. You say, this guy has savlanut. What does savlanut mean? Patience in modern Hebrew. But the word savlanut comes from the word, you have patience. You could sit in one place and do nothing. This is before iPhones and before toys. Imagine that a person could be in an elevator and go up 39 floors and actually talk to the person nearby because there's no phone. Imagine you were waiting for a meeting and you sat in the office for 40 minutes. You remember? You sat in the office for 40 minutes and there was nothing to do because the magazines were 60 years old. Today we don't have those opportunities anymore. There's always a tzatzke you could play with. Savlanut means you could tolerate. Who could you tolerate? Yourself. You could sit with yourself, right? Some people actually find themselves to be more interesting than the emails they got. I don't think it's such a bad idea. Could you find yourself to be an interesting person that you're allowed to sit with yourself? Why, if I take my phone and I read your email, suddenly my life is meaningful. And if I read my own email to myself, life is meaningless? Why did people become so boring in their own eyes? Everybody else around me is interesting. So if I get a text or an email or a WhatsApp, I'm suddenly excited. But if I get nothing and I'm sitting with myself, this is called boredom. Woe unto humans that they find themselves so boring. And other people have to be the source of their interest, something very strange. So savlanut is the ability to sit with yourself. Says this Sfas Emes, V'oitzeisi eschem mitachas sivlois Mitzrayim. I'm going to liberate you from a situation where you tolerate Egypt. Sivlois Mitzrayim. Because exile in Egypt comes from the fact that you tolerate it. All subjugation comes from the fact that you tolerate it. You tolerate it. You make peace with it. It's the battered victim who makes peace with it. Why do I make peace with it? I don't see another possibility. I don't see another potential. It's the best I can do under the circumstances. I acquiesce. I surrender. So God tells Moshe, before you get redeemed, the first thing is you have to scream. Don't have so much savlanut for Mitzrayim. Have savlanut for yourself, not for Mitzrayim. Not for the Mitzrayim in you. Sivlois. Some things are intolerable. The moment you'll realize it's intolerable, you'll get out of it. Because it's intolerable. I grew up in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. It's a cute story, but also a deep story. And I went to a school, and the school never had money. Like every good Jewish school, especially a few decades ago, you never had money. Never money. The steam didn't work in the winter, the air conditioner, the steam didn't work in the winter, the air conditioner didn't work in the summer. Sometimes for a few weeks there were peas every day for lunch. You remember peas? That was like the classic food. If they were wealthier, they gave rice. And of course, always milk. You had to eat peas and milk with rice. Peas and rice with milk. Okay, sure. And then they told us one day that the Chinese live long because they drink milk. 8 cups of milk and they eat rice, right? Turns out that the information wasn't exactly impeccable. But in any case, the bus always broke down. I mean, the bus, we enjoyed it because if you didn't make it to school, it was a good day. And if the steam didn't work, we got to go home, or the teacher took us to his house to learn. Anyway, the director of the school, he was a holy Jew, actually, an Elter Yid. And the steam didn't work, and it was a winter day, and it was freezing in class. So we were all sitting with our coats and complaining, and we really loved it because it was wonderful. It meant there's going to be stories and more recess, etc., and the teacher is really not in the mood of controlling the class. So we used to pray for the steam to break, and there were even guys who made a contribution to help God fulfill their prayers. So this fellow comes in and he says, I was in Siberia and it was much colder. So he gave us a reference point in life. Anyway, the bus broke down one day. A bus. You could call that a bus, like you could call your father's station wagon a car. Just like your father's blue station wagon was a car, this was a bus. A bus. It belonged to the Beis HaKvaris, but they called it a bus. This school had 2 directors, like they were on top. They were old Hasidic Russian Jews who lived under Stalinist persecution for years, and they were taka holy Jews. They weren't mamish living in this world so much, but they were good people, like ehrliche Yidden, as you would say, really ehrliche Yidden. And they were standing on Eastern Parkway in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, between Brooklyn and New York Avenue. I don't know if you know the geography of Brooklyn. And there was a yellow bus there, dilapidated, verhakt, zerschmettert. The Malach HaMavis lived there. But it said a sign for sale. For sale. And these 2 Hasidic Jews, mit lange weiße Bart, were looking at the bus like you survey your house. They were looking at the bus and examining it. Who walks by? The Lubavitcher Rebbe is walking home. He would walk home every day. He would walk home himself constantly. So he's walking. He lived on President Street, so he's walking on Eastern Parkway, and he sees these 2 characters looking at this bus. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe stops and says, "Was guckt ihr so? What are you looking?" So they say the bus of the yeshiva broke down. The kids don't have a bus. They're basically doing carpool for hundreds of kids. So we need a bus, and we saw that it's for sale. So we're looking, maybe we could borrow money, get money to pay for the bus. We need a new bus. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe takes a look at the bus. He says, "The chachurban. This bus is dilapidated. This bus is dilapidated. How could you purchase such a bus? You need to get a nice bus, a functional bus, a comfortable bus, an elegant bus." So they both smile. They say, "Even for this bus, we don't have the money. Even this bus, which is 10 times cheaper than any other bus, we don't have the money. You want us to go get a nice, new, elegant, comfortable bus? That's certainly out of the picture. Even this we don't know how we're going to pay for." So the Lubavitcher Rebbe told them, I'll say it in Yiddish and then I'll translate. Weist va was, hat nicht de Geld. Weist va was, hat nicht de Geld. Va a schöne Autobus, he said. Weil bei euch is recht, as the Kinder sollen fahren in a bus. The reason you don't have the money to be able to purchase a nice, comfortable bus is because in your mind, it's fine if the children travel in this bus. It's completely fine. In other words, very often, it's our expectations of reality that define the reality. If something is intolerable for you, it's not tolerable, it's not a question. Then you will find within yourself skills and resources that you didn't find before. That's not a miracle idea. This is actually a very deep idea about the human psyche. If something is acceptable, you will not be able to get out of it because your system makes peace with it. And then you can't get out of it. You're stuck. I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that. So Moshe Rabbeinu is told by Hashem, the first thing is, you have to stop tolerating Egypt. You have to say, this is not going to happen. This is intolerable. You have to be able to cry out. You have to be able to protest against the status quo of subjugation, of oppression, of violence, of bloodshed, of abuse, of discrimination, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. Then you can go free. If not, a strong hand could schlep you out, but you'll run right back in. Because even if you could take out the exile from the Jew, how do you take the Jew out of the exile? I could take you out of Mitzrayim. How do I take Mitzrayim out of you? And that's why when the Jews go to the desert, they keep on saying, after every crisis, I want to go back. Why do you want to go back? They threw your children into a river. And the sad answer is because familiar abuse is sometimes more tolerable than an unfamiliar future, even if it sounds like freedom. Because somehow I became accustomed to it. Now this takes courage. Mitachas sivlis Mitzrayim. What do? I burn the nerves. If I get rid of my nerves, I could put my finger in fire and let it be decimated, chas v'shalom, and there's no pain. I'm smiling. Why? I'm drugged up. I'm numb. And again, there are different ways of being numb. Some of us do it through binging. Some of us do it through other methods. But the point of numbness is, I shouldn't be able to feel. I shouldn't be able to feel the consequences, so I don't have to take responsibility. Just as there are spiritual laws of cause and effect within me, within my body, within my soul, within my mind. Every action has a reaction. Every action has a consequence. That's what it means to take responsibility for life. Just like every time I eat the potato chips, there's a consequence, unless you eat one piece of potato chip. But I have not figured that out yet. How do you eat one piece of potato chip? You never eat one piece of potato chip. You finish the bag and then you do another bag because the appetite has been developed. I'm not talking about you. What do they say? Meretzem zunem meint schnur, yeah? It's an expression in Yiddish. You talk to your son, you mean your daughter-in-law. You can't talk to your daughter-in-law, so you tell your son, why you're such a this? But the point is that a person can't, it's nothing. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. I needed the vitamins. I didn't take the vitamins. I needed the medicine. I needed the injection. Whatever it is that a person needs, I have to respect it. When a person cannot respect their body and their soul, what often happens is they deny their reality. And when they deny their reality, the consequences are often very serious. Now, it's easy to live in denial because who wants to live with consequences? My father died from diabetes. I saw what he went through as a diabetic. Couldn't eat anything on the table. It's much better not to believe in consequences. You could sit and eat what's at the table. I'm a chaya. Believing in consequences creates problems for life. The problem is that the alternative is a much greater problem. Because the moment of what it means to live a good life is when I can accept the boundaries of reality. That's not called repressing yourself. It's called aligning yourself with who you are. I could live a life of alignment, and I can live a life of, give me the opposite. Dissonance. Dissonance, very good. I could live a life of alignment in which I am aligned with me, with my body, with my energy, with my psyche, with my neshama, and I could live a life of disalignment. How long can I be disaligned? Is there such a word, disaligned? Okay. Misaligned. How long can I be misaligned? A day, a month, a year, unless I numb the pain. But how long? I can't. Because I have to be I. And I doesn't only mean my blood type, it means that too. Doesn't only mean my digestive system, it means that too. Doesn't only mean the type of energy I have, that too. It also means my soul, my psyche, my mind, my inner consciousness, and my neshama. Aligned with me, alignment, a life of alignment. A life of misalignment is a life in which ultimately I'm fighting my own reality. I'm betraying it. And the reality speaks up. Reality always speaks up because it's real. Reality comes from the word real. Just as there are consequences in my body and in my soul, there's laws of cause and effect, it's also true in the whole universe. All the studies of chemistry, the studies of science, basically the studies of engineering, it's all understanding what works and what doesn't work. If you're going to combine two forces, but they can't be combined, you're going to have a disaster. You want to build a bridge, and you want cars to be able to drive over that bridge, to get from one side of the water to the other side of the water. If you're not respecting the mechanical laws upon which our planet are built, what are you doing? It's very nice if you build a plane and you don't respect the laws of aerodynamics. If you build any machine and you don't respect the laws of engineering, what are you building? You're creating a disaster. At best, it will be futile. At worst, you'll endanger people's lives. Person builds a car and decides, I'm going to build it the way I want to build it. Very nice, very geschmack. And then you put the person on the road, you put the person on the highway. You're creating a disaster. So now I ask you a question. Adhering to the laws of engineering or the laws of science is called enslavement. It's called repression. What do you think? Anybody? The exact opposite, of course. It's respecting the fact that you live in reality. And if you want to achieve something, this is the way to achieve it, because these are the laws of reality that you're part of. This is essentially what is at the core of halacha. When we speak about halacha, a system of law, systems, and often teenagers and adults and young adults in various conversations and classes and interactions and emails, most ask me the question, I don't want to live by a system that represses me. I don't want to live by a system that confines me, that inhibits me, that boxes me in. I don't want that. I want to be a free person. I want to be emancipated. Which is a very natural outcry, especially of a young spirit, a female or a male young spirit those who want to be inhibited. And here is a very important principle in life. There are two types of inhibitions. There are inhibitions that come from within, and there are inhibitions that come from without. There are inhibitions that are essential to reality, and there are inhibitions that are imposed on you. The inhibitions of halacha are a blueprint for life that respects the boundaries of your body and respects the boundaries of your soul, that you could be able to flourish, not be repressed. That your energy should be able to be quadrupled, should be able to grow, should be able to increase, that your momentum should be more powerful. I'll give an example from the world of science, something called laser technology. Laser technology developed just a few decades ago, and it was fascinating. Today, people go into the hospital and they perform a laser surgery. Laser surgery gets into the body without an incision. Through laser technology, they could work in a diamond. And the laser beams of light have the power to penetrate and have a tremendous impact without the physical methods of breaking it down as it was before the discovery of laser. What is laser technology based on? Very briefly and simply, every object in the world emits light. That light is ferocious. The problem is, it emits light in all directions, and therefore it gets weakened because the light gets squandered in all directions. What does laser technology do? It harnesses and confines and limits the light to be able to go only in one direction. And as a result of that, it unleashes all of its power in a concentrated fashion. And then with the laser, you can perform extraordinary feats because the light has been focused and harnessed and channeled in one direction, so it's not squandered here and there and there. So now I ask you, is laser confining and inhibiting? Yes, but what is it really doing? It's unleashing its full power. It's unleashing its full potential. If you don't limit the light and you let the light go everywhere, it's just weakened. With laser technology, you can perform surgeries, same-day surgeries, very heavy surgeries that are done today, without a cut. That's the power of that light. Why? On one level, you can find it, but you can find it in order to have all of it, to have all of its energy. So imagine somebody tells me, Rabbi YY, if you stop eating this and this and this and this, and you go work out XYZ a day or a week, your energy will be quadrupled. You'll think faster, you'll produce faster, you'll sleep less, you'll have more koyach, you'll have more stamina. So I say, I don't want to live a life of confinement. It's all about I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't. No, I'm not confining you, I want to unleash you. I want to get to the atomic energy, I want to get to your nuclear energy. Without the discipline, your energy is all over the place. Now you're in a good mood, 10 minutes later you're in a bad mood. Tonight you don't sleep because you're active, and then the next day you sleep for 18 hours. Teenagers know what I'm talking about. And then you're up for 3 days because you're excited about some project, or you found yourself a new friend who you think likes you for 2 weeks. And then you're in a bad mood for 2 weeks. My energy is all over the place. By confining the light, I channel it that your full momentum should be able to come out. That's the function of halacha. That's all halacha. There's not a single halacha. Torah is the spiritual laser technology of the universe. Recognizing the light, and recognizing its power, and recognizing what it needs in order to be able to be unleashed. Which is why halacha comes from the word halichos olam loi. Hoylech. What does hoylech mean? Movement. Now, isn't it a contradiction? How do most people understand halacha as what? Rigid, structure. Halicha means motion, movement, growth. It's not growth. It's not creative. It's fixed. That's what halacha means. This is the law. That's the sad part. You don't understand what halacha is. If you don't see that halacha is halicha, you don't get it. In other words, the real master of halacha is the most creative person. Halacha in its authenticity unleashes profound creativity. In fact, unlimited creativity. You'll tell me, some people have a completely opposite experience, where all they experience is inhibition, confinement, repression, rigidness, and a form of melancholy and a lack of joy. It's because they didn't get the second part of the memo. In other words, it's exactly like a poet once said, you have a violin, and the violin plays beautiful music, but there's one condition. The strings have to be tied down. If you take a scissor and you cut all the cords and you let them soar and fly, and you put them outside in this beautiful wind, and the strings of your violin are flying and waxing poetically, it's wonderful and beautiful, but music will not emerge from this violin. Strings that are tied down can also create a violin that produces the most exquisite and delightful music, and the same is true in life. The laws of nature exist not only in me, they exist in the entire universe. The universe is governed by laws of nature. I can't deny them. There are physical laws of nature, there are spiritual laws of spiritual nature, based on the spiritual design of the universe. Very important, the spiritual design. Halacha is sensitive to the physical design and the spiritual design. Your organism has a design. It has a makeup. And the world has a design and makeup. And no atheist can deny this. when he or she wants to build anything that will be useful. How many experiments did the Wright brothers, you ever read about the Wright brothers figuring out the first airplane when in 1902, I think, or 1901? Which year was it? 1903? You did a report on it? You did a report on it? How many experiments did they have to do? It's not just going to fly. The same is true with the spiritual laws of nature. Disrespecting it is not a form of freedom. It's a form of denying the truth of reality, which will only come to haunt me because it will keep me trapped in a life of disalignment. Blessed is the life of alignment, even if that sometimes is challenging. Just like the laser light needs to be confined because it has to be channeled in one direction. Can it be represented as repression and oppression? Of course. That's what Egypt does. Sivlois Mitzrayim. But one can change their paradigm and appreciate a different perception, which now brings us to the concept of reward and punishment. Real reward and punishment is about consequence. Whatever you do creates energy. That energy comes back to you. What I say creates energy. What I do creates energy. When the butterfly flaps its wings and they say there's a storm in China, every action creates a reaction. Everything creates energy, and the energy comes back to me. The energy lives in me, and the energy lives around me, and the energy lives outside of me. Just like whatever I take into my body creates something. There's an impact. I may feel it now. I may feel it in 20 minutes. I may feel it in 2 hours. I may feel it in 4 years. But there's an impact. The more conscientious, the more aware I am, the more I'm sensitive to the impact. I know a couple who decided after 20, 30 years of marriage, they're becoming crazy health freaks. But mamish, they went to a nutritionist and he wrote out a new diet. And all the old food, classic Shabbos food, mayonnaise, sugar, oil, liver, kishka, all the food that kill, all out. Lettuce, spinach, kale, more kale, dessert kale, breakfast kale, dinner, more kale, soybeans, a snack is like tofu or something, chia seeds for a snack maybe. Whatever that type of food. After a month they did it and they decided to celebrate. How does a Jewish couple celebrate? They go out to a regular restaurant and they eat a normal Jewish meal, which means, of course, Chinese and Japanese, the classic Jewish foods from before Matan Torah. They come home that night and they can't sleep. The stomach is turning over. They're nauseous. They want to vomit. They feel horrible. He tells me 6 a.m, he calls the nutritionist. He says, "You deceived me. I've been eating potatoes for 50 years. It never bothered me. For 1 month, I went on your stupid diet. And last night, I ate some potato and some sugar and some rice, and I'm sick." And the nutritionist told him, after a month, you became healthy enough that your body protested the toxicity that you have been feeding it your whole life. You became healthy enough to get sick. You were so sick that you weren't sick. Because you were so sick. You were numb. Your body shut down. Now you're healthy to become sick. This is a true insight in life. The fact that you're protesting it is good. This is the beginning of redemption. This is the intolerance of dysfunction. This is the fact that misalignment creates consequences. And if you could feel it and feel bad about it, good. That's the good news. It's not the bad news. If you feel that Golus is Golus, you're on the way to Geula. The problem is not the Golus. The problem is you think Golus is Geula. The fact that somebody told me this, the fact that I'm ignorant is not a problem. The challenge is when I think ignorance equals knowledge. I don't mind talking to ignorant people. That's why I talk to myself all the time. That's not a problem. A good teacher likes to speak to ignorant people. You know what's painful? When one speaks to ignorant people who substitute and perceive their ignorance as knowledge and insight. They're stuck forever in the trap of exile. That's why sometimes people who grew up with familiar terms, it's much harder to reach them than people who grew up with a blank slate. When you grew up with a blank slate, you say, here's an empty piece of paper, tell me what to write. But if my paper is already filled with misinformation, and I think it's information, I don't come with openness. I try to fit in what you're saying into my perception, and thus I mitigate, I dilute, I misconstrue, and I compromise everything. You all understand what I'm talking about? If I was talking to men, this would take 3 hours to explain. So I'm glad that we can go brief. Okay. So now let's come to the next step. When Torah speaks about a punishment, the real idea is what I do creates energy. And it comes back, it generates consequences. Physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. When we speak about Olam Haba basically means living in the consequences of what I did. Being aware of the truth of reality without numbing. Olam Haza is a world of numbing. I take a coffee, I take tea, soon as lunch, then is dinner, then is breakfast, then we go out, then I have to do this, then I have to, and Olam Haba, you don't even have an iPhone. So what do? You got to sit with yourself. You got to sit with your real self, and work it out, work it through. All the 10 plagues of Egypt were consequences of the energy they produced. Therefore, we have the concept of tshuva. What is tshuva? Tshuva doesn't mean repentance. Repentance is a Christian translation. I don't know if you know. What's the Jewish what does tshuva mean? Return. What does return mean? Alignment, realignment. What does the word aveira mean? Sin is a Christian translation. What's the translation of aveira? Not transgression. Cross over. Pass over. What did I pass over? I passed into a place that violated boundaries. My own. Aveira, I was over. We say over mamakam lamakam. You passed. What did you pass? I missed the opportunity for alignment. I passed over into a place that defies my boundaries. The word mitzvah, you know what the real translation of the word mitzvah is? Commandment. No, what's the real translation of the word mitzvah? Connection. Alignment. Mitzvah means alignment. What you do is something that connects. I don't know too many people who like to be commanded, especially your kids. But I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be connected. It's alignment, it's connection. Connection with what? Connection with truth, with your own truth, and with all of truth. It's alignment. Misalignment creates havoc. It wreaks havoc everywhere. Misalignment. It's like taking a child away from a mother prematurely. It used to be, and this is well known in psychology as attachment theory. Do you know that till the 1960s, right? You brought a child to the hospital, mommy could not stay with the child. You could visit once a week for an hour. You said, but this kid is 4 years old. Time to grow up. You're turning him into a baby. The idea of education was less hugs, less affection, less dependency, more maturity, more responsibility. Today, their entire conception changed. They understood it's actually creating more dependency, more dysfunction by not nurturing attachment when you need it. Because alignment means you could be who you have to be. So then you could become who you have to become. As a result of this, we have now the concept of barad. Every plague was a consequence of the energy. That's why, I did once a class on this, I think a few years ago, but I'm not going to do it right now, but the 10 plagues corresponded to the 10 midos, to the 10 koiches of the soul. Keser, Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, Malchus. Each plague represented a misalignment of that particular faculty. And that's why it's divided into 7 and 3, because there's 7 midos and there's 3 higher faculties: Keser, Chachma, and Bina, or Chachma, Bina, Das. And then you have the 7 emotions, Chesed through Malchus, that we do in Sfiras HaOmer. Because the plague essentially was a manifestation of misalignment. Barad came in the form of hail with fire inside, but that was a physical manifestation of a world gone crazy as a result of human oppression, as a result of the abuses of human rights and Jewish rights and life rights, moral rights in Egypt. When God tells Moshe, when Moshe comes to Hashem and Daven, stop. Paro said, I want to do tshuva. Paro said for the first time, Chatasi, Hashem hatzadik v'ani v'ami harishoyim. What happened now? This was a moment of alignment. It wouldn't last. Paro was Paro, but it was a moment of tshuva, relatively speaking. That moment he was sincere. He changed his mind. That happens to many of us. The doctor calls you in and says, this is serious, and for a week you behave. And then you feel good again, right? And we go back to normal. We make fun of Paro. Don't we all do the same thing? When there's a crisis, everything is changing. When life goes back to normal, life goes back to normal. Takes a lot of discipline and courage to be able to maintain the awareness when crisis is gone. A lot of courage. And thus, at that moment, Paro was sincere. Moshe comes to Hashem. And what does he say? Paro won't do it anymore. Please stop. And it stops. It stops. It stops right now. But what happens? The droplets of water. What happens to the droplets of water that are there? What happens right now? The first interpretation of Rashi is they remain. They remain there. The second interpretation is they're gone. They don't remain there. They don't remain. Rashi says, Lo yutzak la'aretz, they're gone. They're never poured out to the earth. Meaning either they descend or they're just obliterated and the new ones don't come. What's the difference? Oh, it's not a small difference. It's the great question of what healing means, what tshuva means. What happens to the raindrops is a reflection of what happens to the soul, because it's all a reflection. Punishment is not separate. It's just a manifestation of energy. There are 2 ways to understand tshuva. And let me give a somewhat physical, psychological illustration. I'm walking in the street. It's a beautiful day. It's a calm day. I'm serene. And suddenly, whack, something whacks into my forehead. And I take a look and I see a piece of ice with fire inside just whacked into my forehead. And I look around, why did nobody else experience that? And then I realize I just walked into my past. And because I walked into my past, nobody else experienced it. Because this was just my past. That's the first interpretation. I walk into my past. The droplets are there. And I bump into them, and they're there, and they stay there, even after healing. And then there's a second interpretation that says, no, they're gone. And this has to do with a very profound question. What does tshuva mean? And there's really 2 states of that. And very briefly, it goes like this. One concept of alignment means I realign myself, I regret what happened, and I change my course for the future. But I can't change the past. How many of you are sitting in this room who have regrets over mistakes that you have done in your life? Anybody? Okay, is there anybody who has no regrets? With Yiddish mamas, hard to speculate. Even the most confident among you, and I know some of you are very confident people and proud people, but if you're Jewish, there is a regret, I promise you. Some have big regrets. Some are sitting here and have regrets that don't let you sleep at night. And many of them have to do with yourself, with your parents, with your marriage, and of course, a topic you may be familiar with your children. If only. I got an email a few days ago, a fellow, he listened to a few lectures of mine on marriage, and he writes to me, why couldn't you post them 40 years ago when I got married? I said, because I was 6 years old, that's why. I was eating cotton candy. I wasn't lecturing on Shalom Bayis. I still eat cotton candy, but now I also lecture on Shalom Bayis. That's life. We have regrets. There's not a healthy person who doesn't have regrets. In fact, if you're a person, you have to have regrets. The Medrash says, Tshuva was created before the world. What does this mean? How could Tshuva be created before the world? Isn't Tshuva fixing the damage we did in the world? The answer is, if you're a human being, mistakes are inevitable. Not necessarily because you're a bad person, because we always grow. Even furthermore, mistakes that I made yesterday, they may have not been mistakes. But as I grow, my consciousness grows, my horizon grows, I go back and I say, that was a missed opportunity. By definition, there's always tshuva. Even the greatest tzaddik lives in tshuva. Tshuva means more awareness. And in infinity, there's never a shortage of more awareness. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is, what was, let's focus on the future. And it's not a bad attitude. It's not such a bad and unwise attitude to say, Masha haya, haya. Ayin daigo minayin. Which means, I don't know, it's a nice poem in Hebrew. What's past is gone. What's in the future is also, it's not here yet. The present passes like the blink of an eye. What are you worried about? Yeah, go tell that to you guys. Daiga minayin, right? Or somebody once said, the past, the present, and the future walked into a bar and it was tense. So, one attitude is, you're going to wallow in mistakes, you're going to live in regret, you're going to sit and clap a whole day, Hashamnu, Bagadnu. Yom Kippur is a time to say Hashamnu. You want to say Tachnun every morning? There's a few minutes you say Tachnun. You can't live your whole life, Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Banadoifi, and let's go again. Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu. Al Chait, Al Chait, Al Chait. Because you become dysfunctional. You become depressed and you repeat more mistakes. Depression is also a sin. So this attitude is, yes, there were consequences, there was damage, there was a lot of negativity, and that's it. That's what it is. The power of a life is, I can recreate a future. Somebody once described the difference of two people. Two 70-year-olds gave away their tefillin to check. They came back, they're puzzled, they're disqualified. One guy says, wow, I never put on tefillin in my life. What a failure, what a loser. The other person says, wow, how lucky I am that at the age of 70, I can discover that I need new tefillin, and I can start putting on new tefillin. He understood the past. That's why he felt lucky. In other words, he focused on the future. He focused on the opportunity. Because sometimes people just beat themselves up for mistakes they may have made consciously, unconsciously, inadvertently, when I was awake, when I was asleep, when I was stupid, when I was smart, when I was alert, when I was not alert, when I was dumb, when I was a baby, when I was an adult, I was abused, I wasn't abused, I was almost abused. I was meshuga, I was toit meshuga. I was out for lunch, I was out for breakfast, I was out for supper. My husband made me meshuga, my shviga made me meshuga, this one made me meshuga, I made myself meshuga. And what's the result? The result is now I'm really crazy and I'm worthless and useless and I give up on myself, which only makes me repeat more mistakes. And therefore this concept is, you got to look at now and you got to look at the future. Is there a time to cry? Of course there's a time to cry. Is there a time to grieve? There's a time to grieve. And that helps, gives perspective. But there's a deeper explanation. And those are the two explanations in Rashi. And the chiddush of the second explanation is that even in the world of Egypt, even in the world of Parai, even in the world of the non-Jew, there's also a second explanation. Not only do the droplets of rain remain suspended, and remember, punishments are always manifestations of what you did. When you look at a droplet of rain, it's bumping into your forehead. What is it? You bumped into your past. And the past remains there. Remains. And it keeps me humble. It's a good thing. It keeps me humble. And being humble is a very good thing. The Baal Shem Tov had a chassid. And the chassid said to him, I want to see Eliyahu Hanavi. He said, you don't have to see Eliyahu Hanavi. No, I want to see. I'll do anything. He gave him an avodah for 10 years. He worked for 10 years. He never saw Elijah. Came back to the Baal Shem Tov and he said, 10 years down the drain. He says, why down the drain? I accomplished nothing. He says, what do you mean you accomplished nothing? You became humble. Till then you were flying in the sky, you and Eliyahu. You're humble. 10 years you worked, you didn't say Eliyahu. Now you're a person. There's a question in Yiddish, he thinks he has all the birds in the bosom. Eliyahu Hanavi is in the bosom. Eliyahu Hanavi doesn't come to bosoms. It's good, you're good. Humility is not a bad thing in life. It's deep. If you could just accomplish humility in this world, is also not such a bad feat. Not a bad thing. The Bryce at the end of Saita speaks about Anova, the Mesilas Yesharim, dedicates a section to humility. Many Svarim and Musra and other Svarim discuss Anova, this fake humility. This fake humility. You know, I'm so perfect, I'm humble too. You know that type of humility. I'm humble too. I bend down my head, I don't look, and I'm humble. There was a funeral of somebody. A Yid, and somebody gets up at the funeral and says, I want to tell you how humble he was. You could tell me what you think about this later. I'm just going to tell you the story. A person got up at a funeral a few years ago. A prominent person passed away, and the person gets up and I want to tell you how humble he was. When he would walk into a wedding, he knew that everybody is going to stand up for him. But he was humble, so what would he do? He would always walk in with a sefer. So he could tell himself, they're not standing up for me, they're standing up for the book, and maintain his anava, maintain his humility. But authentic humility, think about the story. Authentic humility, nicht gefährlich. But there's a second interpretation. And the second interpretation, Rashi says, is that the water not only didn't arrive to the ground, it didn't remain suspended in the air. It was gone. New water didn't emerge, and this water didn't pour down to the earth. The Rashi doesn't only mean, some say Rashi means it didn't pour down to the earth, it stayed in the earth. When you study the Rashi well, Rashi is giving a whole new interpretation. It didn't remain mid-air. It didn't remain suspended in mid-air. It was taken away. It was eliminated. What is this representing? This is representing a different type of tshuva, where I can redefine the past. But you can only get to number 2 after you go through number 1. What does it mean to redefine the past? Here we come to the final point, and it's going to be brief, and I hope you'll get it. We humans give context to everything. The same act could be experienced by 2 people in two different ways, and it's seen as a completely different act. Let me give a very graphic example. Forgive the example, I just want to explain it. 2 people can be yielding a knife. Take the knife and cut open a belly. One you will call a gangster, a murderer, and the other one you will call a saint, a surgeon, a healer. You'll be thankful to him for the rest of your life, or to her for saving your loved one's life with that incision, with that cut. What do you mean? It's a knife. A belly was cut open. Context. Context. This is in a dark alley, a gangster, a terrorist, a killer. This is a surgeon in a hospital in a uniform. A patient who's sick, he's trying to save his life. They're both using the same weapon. This is a weapon of destruction. This is an instrument of healing. I could use a knife to cut somebody, cut my finger. I could use a knife to cut challah. Nuclear energy could compensate for our electricity. And we also know other things that atomic energy can do. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not getting involved about Truman's decision, which is not our discussion today, but we know the impact of atomic energy, of the atom bomb. 1945 Japan. It's all context. What does this mean? What happens if I took out a spiritual knife and I cut something that shouldn't have been cut? I damaged. I hurt. I took out a spiritual knife. Words could be like a knife. Yirmiyah says words are like arrows. Some people, when they speak, it's like a knife. Anybody ever told you anything and you felt a stab in your chest? Emotional stab. Ooh, it's a knife. I take out a knife and I make a cut where I shouldn't make a cut. But what happens if I can redefine that experience of in terms of a surgeon holding a knife and saving somebody's life? The facts didn't change, but the entire experience changes. What does this mean in a person's life? What it means in a person's life is there's no event in life. I shouldn't say no. There's almost no event in life that remains only stuck in the past. There is one perception of reality, but there's something much deeper in the human potential. What is the deeper layer of the human potential? It's the ability of a person not only to fix things for the future, but even with the proper courage and awareness to go back in time and redefine the past. Not only leave the droplets suspended in the air, but actually eliminate them. How do I eliminate them? How do I obliterate them? This requires a deep sense of consciousness. A deep sense of consciousness talks to me and says this to me. May have made bad choices. I may have made bad choices. I'm thinking how to say this brief because it's a little complicated. God knows the future, including my bad choices. Do I have free choice or don't I have free choice? If I have free choice, then does God really know the future? If I don't have free choice, then I don't have free choice. So God can predict everything before it happened. So then I don't have free choice, because God already knew 1,000 years ago what I'm going to do today. So I'm stuck. I'm just a program. I'm like a computer program. The answer is there are two parallel universes. There is the universe in which God knows everything and does everything. There is the universe in which I make my own choices detached from God. Two completely parallel universes. There's the universe where God knows and God is the master of everything. There's the universe where I know and I make choices. And they're real choices. God didn't dictate what I should do. But you say everything is hashgacha pratis. It's two universes. One is a world of divine providence and control. One is a world of free choice. And here is the clicker. When a person does real tshuva, what happens? You align your universe to God's universe, and then the act becomes a divine act, which means it's redefined into a catalyst and springboard for much more goodness, for much more awareness, for much more truth, and for much more depth. Or to put it in different words, every mitzvah has a preparation. There's no mitzvah without a preparation. You can't sit in a sukkah if you don't build it. You can't eat challah, you can't eat a Shabbos meal if you don't cook it. You could tell your husbands in my name. The cholent doesn't emerge in a vacuum, doesn't get hatched in the kitchen. Somebody has to prepare it. You can't blow shofar if you don't cut off the ram's horn. You can't put on tefillin. If you don't make the tefillin, you can't light a Shabbos candle if you don't fashion the wax and the wick into a candle. Every mitzvah has a preparation. There's no mitzvah without hechsher mitzvah, right? Now I ask you a question, I'm going to ask you to answer. Every mitzvah has a preparation. What do you have to do to prepare for this mitzvah? There's a mitzvah called tshuva, repentance. What's the preparation you have to do for tshuva? Strange answer. Sin. Can't do tshuva without a sin. I can't return if I didn't get lost. Ways can't tell me. Recalculate if I didn't take a wrong turn. How do you return if you never left the house? You got to get lost to return. But how can you say sin is a preparation for tshuva? If I wanted to prepare for tshuva, would I sin? I'm asking you, if I really want to prepare for tshuva, would I sin? Come on, nobody can answer this question? Of course not. If I care about God, how do I sin? So when I sinned, I didn't prepare for tshuva. But it's the only way you could do tshuva. So what happens? When I sin, I was misaligned. When I do tshuva, my world now aligns itself with God's world. And the sin is redefined from a sin into the preparation for tshuva. Think about it. Have a wonderful week. Sin was misalignment. When I do real tshuva, I align my world with Hashem's world. So now the sin is redefined into the preparation for mitzvah. It became the springboard for awareness, for growth, for transformation. Much deeper transformation. Chabad Chassidus.
Everything is a Chabad thing at the end of the day. Just take the Tanya out. You'd be surprised what you find.
The brothers that run Torah anytime. I forgot his name. What's his name?
I remember. Ben Yaakov.
No, it's something with an Ovi at the end.
Jacobi.
Jacobi, maybe. You have his number by any chance in your phone?
No,
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't deal directly with them.
Question. How do you convince a person that is convinced that their halacha and restrictions and that they're in a box to come out of that box and realize that it's not the way it seems to be?
Yeah. You got to send them to my classes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have another question. Is there, am I like being recorded or anything? Can I set up somehow an appointment to come see you, to speak to you about a couple of
You can
things?
email me, okay?
Where should I?
I have a son
Very
who's a
nice.
doctor. They've gone all the way.
Huh?
What's to stop you? It makes you have a great game.
Very nice.
There you go. Thank
You're
you
saying
so
if you're
much.
on the roof and there's no fence, you can't
Right.
play football because you're going to
Basketball.
fall
How
off
are you
and
gonna
kill
play
yourself.
basketball?
If you have a fence around the roof, you can give it all you got.
You got a great game, man. Go right up there.
Till the fence.
Till the fence. That's
Very
Abba
good.
Pro Mater.
Very nice.
It's a fantastic
That allows you
motto.
to play the game
I've said that
fully.
at Shabbos table so many times, and people go, it's true.
You can play the game fully.
Fully.
Very nice.
Ask any of my kids, fully, and they still talk to Abba.
Really?
My son for sure.
Very nice.
Also, the bus resonated very well with anything in life. If you're not aiming for a brand new bus, you're gonna be stuck.
If in your mind it's
He
justified,
was saying, I said,
if in
you're
your
never
mind it's
gonna have
justified
money
that
for it.
kids should drive in a dilapidated bus,
You're never gonna
that's
have
your
money.
reality. If it would be obvious by you that it
all
shouldn't be
online,
this
you
way,
want to just have broish
Exactly.
you're never gonna have steak.
Right.
I think with anything, with any shidduch, I'm not settling for anything.
yeah, I mean, you have to also be careful with this idea. You have to also be careful with this idea. In other words, sometimes people create
False.
expectations and decide that they are who they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. True.
I decide I'm not settling till I become a billionaire. First, you're going to have a miserable life.
Now that you're never gonna have a job because they're going only for the billionaire. He's not asking for a leg. He wasn't asking for a Rolls Royce. He was asking for a bus.
You have to be a realistic
No,
person.
I think the person
You have to
wasn't
live in
asking-
reality.
But back to the story with the bus, he wasn't looking for a stretch limo. He was asking for a bus.
Right, yeah.
Not asking for a billionaire.
He said, "Ihr habt nicht kein Geld, weil bei euch ist Recht." In other words, if you're comfortable that kids should be with this, of course you don't have money for anything else. Opportunities open up when your imagination opens. In other words, the opportunities are there. What does it say by Hagar? There was no water.
Said about Allah, I'm never going to forget it. We had a teacher at the 10th grade. The one teacher taught us 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th halacha. She did a zachdik halacha, and I was like, if it would be taught by a zachdik teacher, we had no idea what she was even talking about. It was the one subject I didn't listen to. And today I was thinking, which halacha is zachdik? No, really.
I could show you every
Go into
halacha.
it. No, but the
Okay,
way she was
the
teaching
class was
halacha
long
Shabbos.
enough, no?
Yes, it was.
If you understand the nikud of every halacha, it's zaftig.